This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, in this tutorial, Microsoft Excel 2019, we're going to focus on cell references. By default, all cell references are relative references. So basically what that means, when we copy across multiple cells, they change based on the relative position of rows and columns. So let's say, for example, if you copy a formula and you've typed out for the formula equals A1 plus B1. From row 1 to row 2, the formula will become equals A2 plus B2. Now, there are two types of cell references. We have relative and absolute. Relative and absolute references behave very differently when they're being copied and filled to other cells. So let's talk about that briefly. Relative references change when a formula is copied to another cell, and we'll see that in this exercise. Absolute references, on the other hand, remain constant no matter where they are copied, so therefore they never change. So the human nature of Excel is to use relative references, and we're going to see firsthand what goes wrong. And I'm also going to show you how to toggle from one reference type to another. So basically, when we get to that point, I'll emphasize that. So the first thing I'm going to do is start out by building a formula. So I'm in my cell B7 here. So I'm just going to indicate the cell references. And I'm basically doing a simple formula that's going to multiply by this interest rate. And I'm going to hit Control Enter. Most people hit Enter, but the reason why I don't is simple, because I don't want my cell selector to move down to cell B8. It just doesn't make sense. And then another thing I want to point out is that the autofill handle, instead of trying to copy it down manually when you drag it, as long as the column to your immediate left or right are not both blank, you should be able to do this. So if you put your cursor, and notice how the cursor changes, you got to have a good steady hand and a good clean mouse, or just a steady hand if you're not using one. And here's in the laptop's mouse that's built into the bottom of the keyboard. So anyway, you double click rapidly. Now look at all of the error messages. Okay, so obviously relative doesn't always work. In this particular scenario, it doesn't work at all. But why don't we take a further look into this? Now the first cell is, definitely not a problem. Equals A7 times B4. If you notice, B4 is 3.5%. Now let's just skip down to this cell, B9. Hashtag value, exclamation. So that's a clear indication that a value is being used. Well, let's see what that is. If you notice the formula bar right here, what's in cell B6? That's a value. So it gets a little more obvious as you go down the cells. So anytime you're using a relative reference, it does update relative to the location that you're in, which is a problem in this particular case. So what I need to do, I need to highlight all these cells, and I need to get rid of this because it isn't right. So now that brings me to the next point. To toggle from one reference to another, you come up here, you select the cell first, come up here to the formula bar. So basically I had to select the cell that contains the reference that you would like to change. The reference would be the reference that I just indicated, B4. In the formula bar, you select that reference or click right after it that you want to change. You can select the whole formula if you want to change all the references, but in this case, I don't want to do that. So what I do, I hit function 4. And each time I hit that, it changes. See? But you want both the column and row reference to be absolute, because I need to lock that in. I need a constant value. So that's the benefit of the absolute reference. Now, Control Enter once again, you still get the same answer, but look, better results. So now what I'd like to do is, just to wrap this up, I want to build one more formula. So I'm basically taking this principal and I'm going to add the interest, and that should give me a total, $2,588. Not bad at 3.5%. Now let's suppose this wasn't right. what I'm referring to is the interest rate. If I keep those selected, and let's say, well, I'm going to come over here and deselect them. Excuse me. Let's say the interest rate is not correct. It's 6.5%. You notice how fast the cells in column C updated? Because of formulas, Excel will do that. And that's just the human nature of Excel. So this is just a really good example of what you can do with different types of cell references. Very important that you learn this skill in the early stages of Excel. Now, just to reinforce what we just went over, I just switched to the bonus worksheet, and all I'm going to do is build the same formula. So again, I'm just setting this up. There's the interest rate. Okay. So now I want to use my absolute reference shortcut key, F4, Control Enter. Right? So right off the bat, I just know not to use a relative reference. And again, you can't just copy this because then you got to really clean it up. It's just not worth it. And since I'm reviewing this, I'm going to show you the right way to do it. So that would be 8%. Function 4, Control Enter. So hopefully I'm helping you break some bad habits. So we'll do 2 more with you. Watch very carefully. All right, so here's 1 more. This is the last one. So I'm going to multiply that by the interest rate. And once you do it a couple times, you get the hang of it. And it's just like building any type of basic formula. All right. Now, on this sheet, which is called payroll, what I want to stress is the importance of labeling, like using a name to reference a single cell or a range of cells. Now, in column D, I do have a list of salaries. Control Shift down arrow is a super fast way to highlight all them. So basically, I'm going to come up here and activate the Formulas tab. Now, in this Define Names group, we do have an option called Define Name. And it assumes the cell D5 as a name because it's the only cell above D6. So if that name works, click OK. Notice what it says here. So it refers to the sheet payroll. The absolute reference that doesn't change, hint, hint, D6 or D20. Now, keep in mind, if you add more records here, you're going to have to update this, which I'll show you momentarily. So I'm going to click OK. Now, let's see how this name works. So here's the name box. It looks like somebody else made a name. So anyway, salary, and it just brings me back to it. So this is kind of nice. So if you're on like a different sheet, it's great for navigation purposes too. But ultimately, I use it to simplify formula construction. I do. So let me give you an example. Highest salary. That's easy. Max, right? And then I type in the name. Oh, look, it shows up. Double click. Hit enter. You're done. So again, just to reiterate, that's the lowest, right? When you see this drop-down menu, you should activate one of those functions that you need to use. And there it is, salary. And I only typed the first 2 letters. Hit enter. Now average, whoops, equals average. I like this. So let's say you can't remember the name. Remember this shortcut, function 3, F3, and these are all the names that were in here. Well, we made this one. Well, I made it. Click OK. And there it is. So for the last one, again, here we go. Equals sum. I can't remember the name. F3. There it is. That's great if you have those names that are somewhat longer and you keep forgetting them. So it can definitely be helpful. Or if you just type part of it, it'll come up on the screen. Either way, you can't go wrong. Now, like I said, it's an absolute reference. So basically, if I were to scroll down, let's say I add another record. Now, I'm going to cheat here a little bit. I'm using shortcuts. Now, the way I do this is very simple. So let's say, like for the date, The date shortcut I use is control colon or semicolon. Control colon or semicolon. Salary, I'll just type that in there. Now, I want to point something out. How did I copy this one? What I used for that was control apostrophe. Now, I do want to change it. All right. And these don't look the same, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to highlight this cell. I'll come up here and activate the Home tab. This is called Format Painter. All I want to do is copy the look. So I click the paintbrush, it copied the look, now apply it. Click the cell. That's a time saver. I use that a lot in Word and Excel, so it definitely does help to know that. So again, just to reinforce why I did this, I just added a new record, all right? Sure enough, if I go and select salary, it doesn't include that last salary. It's not a good thing because now these numbers don't update automatically. So I got to address that issue like right away before it becomes a bigger problem, right? Yeah. So what do? Well, first things first, come up here, activate your formulas tab. This is so you can update the name. We call this the name manager. So if you need to edit the existing name, delete it, or create a new one, this is where you go. Now, here's the one I did, salary. It's a very simple thing to fix. Just add the number, 1, because it's, 21 rows there. And then you don't click close. A lot of people always want to click that. You actually want to activate the green check mark. That's the OK button. That's where you say, OK, this is done. Then you close it. Because if you do that other step backwards, it's like you didn't even do it. And these numbers have already updated. So this is such a neat thing. What I like about it, just to be practical, if somebody else were to, open this file, it would make a little more sense, to them. Maybe someone who's not well, seasoned in Excel, they might say, okay, so this has to be all the cells. And if they know anything about Excel, like the names, they can even come here, and then they might even understand it even further. It's just the little things that can make, the big differences. So now, I'm going to take you to another area. This is the worksheet that contains employee information, and basically there's like expenses. Now, further down, I have this small table where we really just want to focus on department summary data, like the number of employees per department and the total amounts that are being claimed. Now, this is a real neat example, so pay very close attention to this. So the number of employees should be a 5. If you're looking at the top, it's kind of cut off there. So basically, we have all the departments in column B, the miles traveled in C, and in column D, we have the amounts that are being claimed. So I just want to know the number of employees right now. So I'm going to come up here. This is called the insert function, little fx. And what do you know? Select the function. Now, these don't always come up. You may have to type a couple things or a description, or you may just have to search for it because I recently used these. That's why they're there. I teach Excel a lot, so it doesn't surprise me. So anyway, it's called count if. All right, so I'm going to choose OK. Now my range and my criteria, those are really the function arguments. So in other words, the required data. Range, if you notice, I'm just looking at it right here. That's the cells that you need to count, but it's non-blank cells. So I do want to emphasize that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over here, highlight, the range. And then I want to be very specific to the engineering department. So I just randomly clicked A26. And look, it's already telling me that there's 5. And if you count them, there's only 5. So that's perfect. So I'm done. I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to use that autofill. Now remember, you can either drag it or double click it, as long as these aren't empty on either side. So that's a good example of equals count if B8 through B21 is basically the range. And look, I like how this shows up when you click it. See, criteria, range. See how it's bolded? Very helpful. All right, good deal. So now I'm going to come over here to C26. Same thing. Come up here to the insert function, and this one would be sum if. This one's a little bit different because it has 3 arguments: range, criteria, and sum range. Now, why do you think this one isn't bold, but the first 2 are? I'm going to tell you why. Sum range isn't required. It means you basically don't have to put anything in there. You can just use the first 2 and come out with a different result. But I do want to use all 3. So again, my range is what? Total amounts. Oh, let me move this window off to the side. So my my range is going to be right here, right? My criteria is going to be per department, and then my sum range, remember, it's amounts claimed. So it would have to be this. So I'm going to pause right here for a minute, take a really good look at the criteria and range. Look at those items. And look at the total, 904.89. So must be right? Everything's perfect in Excel, right? So I'm going to double click. There we go. Now, how do I really know that this is right? I'll show you a neat little trick. Watch this. I'm going to highlight just the 5 amounts. Now, look down here on my status bar. Now, you don't have to worry about average. I would focus more on sum, which is 904.89. That is known as auto calculate. So basically, what that's showing you is that my work is right. So good to know. And by the way, you can always right click on the status bar, and there's a lot of things that are turned on and some things that are turned off, like cap locks, if you always have a problem with that. Some people do. So I do sometimes too, from time to time. So there you have it. So this is a really good example of, a couple common functions. Now I'm going to come over here to another sheet. This is the date functions. And again, really good to know. Like for today's date, and this is a type of function that will update automatically. So you may want to think twice before you use this, especially on expense reports and invoices, because if you're sending these to customers, or if you're submitting them for yourself, like expenses, then guess what? They open it up. They don't see the date that you originally submitted it. So watch out for little things like that. Now, for this type of function, you don't have to type it all the time, although it's pretty easy to do. This is called equals today. So it's under the ribbon formulas, date and time. And it has no argument, so you just ignore all this by clicking OK. And there you see, we have October 23rd. So I really just want to know how many days has it been since the last order from all these customers. Now, the function that I use for this one is called the days 360, and it's really based on things like 2 different dates. It's between 2 different dates based on a 360-day year. It's basically 12 30-day months. So that's the one I'm going to use, days 360. All right, and you can always read the brief descriptions, and help is always a click away just to get further into it if you really don't understand the first approach. All right, so start date. I'm going to put on here the order date. I'm going to move down to the end date. Now, you want to be careful with this. What did we learn earlier about references? Because I'm going to copy this, it can't be just B4. Well, it needs to be B14. It can't be B15, 16, 17. If you don't do anything to this, that's what it's going to amount to. It's going to be a relative reference. So I would hit F4. That locks it in, so it only diverts back to B14. Now, I don't really need to use anything for method, but just so you understand what it's there for, they give you a description here, but basically it's either US, NASD, false, or you type in true, or if you leave it blank, it's going to be considered European. It's just another method that people like to use. But basically, I'm going to click OK. I'm going to leave that alone. 2,029 days. I'm going to copy that. So that's how many days have passed since today. So it's been quite some time. So maybe these are customers we need to reach out to. If you want to have a little bit of fun with this, put in your birthday. Put in like the month, day, and year, and don't lie. Right? And figure out how many days have I been alive. I mean, who thinks about stuff like that, right? I don't. but it's just, just to reinforce it. So again, I'm going to come up here to date and time, days 360, move this all off to the side. So again, the start date would be what? My birthday. The end date would be over here, and that should be an absolute reference. So I've been alive 16,123 days, in case you needed to know that. I hope I make it to many, many, many more days, but it's just a neat way to practice. So this was a basic tutorial on functions. Little tip here, if you right click the triangles, you can activate another sheet. So again, these are the triangles I was referring to. Right click, activate comes up, it's just a window, and you can just simply go to another sheet, especially when you can't see them all. Another thing you can do too, you can take the tab split bar, the three little dots, you'll see a double-headed black arrow, just drag it left, right, or you can just tab your way through. You can use control page up, control page down, control page up, control page down. Control page down goes to the right. Can't go any further. Control page up goes backwards to the left. So very helpful to know things like that, especially when your workbook has several worksheets. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope that you learned something new, and I thank you for watching. And again, you can always get in touch with me if you would like a copy of these files. All you have to do is contact me, and I'll be sure to share them with you. At some point, I will make them available on the channel itself, but right at the moment, I just haven't had the time. Thank you, and have a great day.